Today we're playing a Dimir draw deck with a lot of planeswalkers proliferating and basically infinite turns. Let's go. Alright, this is a pretty good first hand. We got Ichormoon Gauntlet and Sheoldred the Apocalypse, two really strong cards in this deck. I'm going to start it off with a land and go to his turn. He plays a black-white land. We could be looking at a combo deck since we're in Historic here. Plays another land and passes. I'll play my Ichormoon Gauntlet. Planeswalkers I control have 0 proliferate and -12 take an extra turn after this one. And whenever I cast a non-creature spell, I can proliferate, but just for 1 permanent. Go to his turn. He'll play a Plains and a Core Celebrant. Whenever it or another creature enters the battlefield under his control, he will gain a life. He'll gain a life, and then it'll be my turn. I'll play a Swamp. I'm going to play a Sheoldred the Apocalypse. It's got Death Touch, and whenever I draw a card, I gain 2 life, and whenever my opponent draws a card, he'll lose 2 life. We'll go to his turn. Lose 2 life on the draw. He'll play a Swamp. He's going to play a Boot Nipper. He can choose if that enters with Death Touch or Lifelink. He's going to choose Death Touch, and he's going to gain a life and pass the turn. And, oh, I just drew a Jace. That'll be a little helpful. I'm going to play a Faerie Vandal, and whenever I draw my second card on each turn, put a +1/+1 counter on him. Then I'll play a Triskaidekafile. I have no maximum hand size. In the beginning of my upkeep, if I have exactly 13 cards in my hand, I win the game. I'll go ahead and pass the turn. He'll lose 2 life on the draw. He'll play a Plains, and then he's going to play a Scion of the Swarm. Whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on it, and it's a 3/3 with flying. He'll do his little gain a life, gain a counter, and go to my turn. I'll play a Staff of Completion. Tap it to pay life, destroy target permanent you own. Tap it to pay 2 life, add a mana of any color. Tap it to pay 3 life, proliferate. Tap it to pay 4 life, draw a card. And for 5 mana, untap it. I can't put a counter on anything here because I don't have any counters, but we'll see if I can get anything soon. I'll pay 4 life with Staff of Completion to draw a card, but I'll gain 2 back from Sheoldred. And, ooh, I drew it to Teferi. That's basically the main planeswalker of this deck. We'll see how it goes. Opponent plays a land. He'll play a Marauding Blight Priest. Whenever he gains a life, each opponent loses 1 life. That's not good because he can finish his combo in this deck here, so we gotta watch out for that, and hopefully we can beat him before then. Opponent plays a Light of Hope. He can either gain 4 life, destroy target enchantment, or put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. Let's see what he picks. He'll gain 4 life. He's gonna swing for 6 here. I'm gonna have to let that hit, but we can't let that keep happening. Ooh, I get to choose planeswalkers here. I think I'm gonna go with Teferi, Temporal, Pilgrim. Whenever I draw a card, he gets a loyalty counter. I can 0 him to draw a card, -2 to create a 2/2 blue spirit. That gets counter whenever I draw a card. And for -12, it's basically board wipe except for 1 permanent, and that permanent goes back to his hand. I'll put my counter on Faerie Vandal. Because of the Ichormoon Gauntlet, I can proliferate with Teferi, and I'll add a counter to my Vandal and to himself. I'll draw a card with the Staff of Completion again. This will put a counter on Teferi, and it will give my Faerie Vandal another counter. I could attack here, but I'm thinking about blocking the Scion of the Swarm this turn, so I'll just go no attacks. Opponent plays a land. And a Tergrid's Lantern. Tap it to make me lose 3 life unless I sacrifice a non-land permanent or discard a card, and you can pay 4 mana to untap it. It's pretty good. He'll also play an Indulging Patrician. It is flying and lifelink, and at the beginning of my end step, if he gained 3 or more life this turn, I'll lose 3 life. He'll hit me with his Lantern. It's a tough choice, but I think I'm going to go with sacrificing the permanent, and I'll get rid of the Staff of Completion, since I don't really have a use for it anymore. Uh-oh, he's gonna swing for 7 at Teferi. Yeah, I'm gonna block that, because I kind of need him to, you know, win the game. I'll play a Jace, Unraveler of Secrets. +1 to scry 1 and then draw a card. -2 to return target creature to its owner's hand. And -8 to get an emblem with whenever an opponent casts their first spell on each turn, counter. I'll throw my counter onto Teferi. Now we'll use Jace to return the Scion of the Swarm to his hand. With all those counters, it's really nice. And then I'll proliferate with Teferi Temporal Pilgrim, just to get more counters on my guys. Now here he's just going to replay his Scion of the Swarm, but it doesn't have any counters on it anymore, so that's good. He'll tap his Tergrid's Lantern, and this is a pretty tough choice, but I think I'm going to go with discarding a card here, since I have so many Faerie Vandals in my hand. It's really only 2, but I'm just still going to discard the Faerie Vandal. He'll swing for 1 in the air at Teferi. Well, I can't block that, so we're going to need another Planeswalker to start proliferating with if we want to keep going. Oof, that is not what I needed. I really needed a Planeswalker here for more proliferation. Whatever. I'll play a Faerie Vandal again. And I'll consider now. I'll throw that counter on Jace. I don't need that surgical base, so I'll put it down. And, okay. That'll put a counter on Teferi and my Faerie Vandal, and I'll cast another Consider. Throw a counter onto Teferi, and oh my gosh. There it is. Vraska, that's what I needed. Now I'll have enough to take an extra turn with Teferi here, and we'll just proliferate with Jace. We'll go no attacks and pass it back to our turn. I'll play a land. I'll play Vraska's Betrayal Sting for full mana cost. For 0, draw a card and lose 1 life, then proliferate. For -2, target creature just becomes a treasure token. And for -9, if a player has fewer than 9 poison counters, they get a number of poison counters equal to the difference. We won't be doing the ultimate. I'll slap a counter on to Teferi with Ichormoon Gauntlet. Now we'll draw a card and proliferate with Vraska here. This will actually let us put 2 counters on Teferi, which is why Vraska's really going to seal the deal for this deck. I'll proliferate with Jace. And then, you guessed it, I'll proliferate with Teferi as well. Couldn't get the extra turn here, sadly, but we should be able to get it going next turn. He's going to hit me with Tergrid's Lantern again. I'm just going to discard a card, and I'll discard Sheoldred, since it's not going anywhere anytime soon. He'll pay 4 to untap the Lantern here, and he'll just tap it again and hit me again. This is a tough choice, but I don't think we're going to win with Triska Decaphile here, so I'll just sack that. He's going to untap it again. Oof, this is getting kind of annoying here. And I think I've just got enough life here that I can just decline without too much happening. Oh, and he's just gonna pass the turn. This is pretty good for me. I will play a land. I'm also gonna cast Vat Emergence. I can put a target creature card from a graveyard under the battlefield under my control, proliferate. I can also pick his graveyard here, but he's got nothing in his graveyard. So I'm just gonna grab a Faerie Vandal. I'll slap a counter from Ichormoon Gauntlet onto Teferi and proliferate. Use Vraska to do her card draw and proliferate again. Once again, putting 2 counters onto Teferi. This will give us enough to take an extra turn, so that's good. I'll -8 Jace to make him counter all his spells, basically. And then I'll -12 with Teferi to take an extra turn. Ooh, Blightbelly Rat will go great with Fell Stinger. So we'll play the Blightbelly Rat. He's got Toxic 1, and when he dies, I'll proliferate. And then we're going to go ahead and play the Fell Stinger. When he enters the battlefield, he can exploit, which means I sacrifice a creature, and then target player draws 2 cards and loses 2 life. So we're going to sack the Blightbelly Rat and proliferate from it. This will also let us draw 2 cards, and we'll actually gain 2 life because of our Sheoldred of the Apocalypse. So this is just going to give us a bunch of triggers. I'll cast Opt, scry 1 and draw a card, and for our Ichormoon Gauntlet trigger, we'll put a counter on Vraska, just because we might not get there with Teferi this turn. Teferi's on top, not sure why I kept that, but whatever, it's fine, we don't need it. I'll proliferate with the Jace, and that'll get us enough counters on Vraska to take our extra turn, so we'll go ahead and do that. Now we'll just proliferate with the Teferi, and you know how the drill goes. Let's just see how long our opponent can last before he just scoops. Yeah, he didn't last much longer. Now if you do want the deck list, it should be in the description, but I mean, probably nobody's gonna see this, so hopefully you enjoyed. I know this was my first video, but yeah.